I want to enlist you to be part of the solution.
I'm white, and I've got everything I need. No one clutches their purses when they're in a room alone with me. And I can drive through any neighborhood I please at any hour, and the police don't do a thing. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got everything I need. I'm a guy getting paid more than a girl with a degree. And I can walk down the streets after dark, no one wants to rape me. And I can get a girl pregnant and just as easily flee. Just like my straight white male dad did to me. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. I've got a pile of broken mirrors and I'm walking under ladders and I'm spilling tons of salt, but to me that doesn't matter, cause my skin and my gender and my orientation are the best things to have if you live in this nation. I recommend it highly. If I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. Shit's gonna work out for me, cause I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Intellectual Dollar Tree. We do the show live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific right here on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/Echoplex Media. If you're listening on the podcast, come check out the Twitch channel sometimes. Or don't, I don't care. You can support this project by going to echoplexmedia.com. Click the support link at the top of the homepage. Find a lot of ways to support us, including buying a tinfoil hat, though the one I'm wearing right now is no longer available. Haha. Anyway, I'm producer Dave. You can find me tomorrow trying to dial in my new lights so that I don't look terrifying. Otherwise, you can find me on Blue Sky at PlexDave.
And I am Sylph, and you can find me on Mastodon at hperrin at port87.social. And you can also find me on Blue Sky at hperrin with a dot between the second R and the I.
Excellent. How much do you know about Alex Karp?
None.
How much do you know about Palantir?
Close to none.
Okay. Well, Palantir is a defense contractor. It's part of the Peter Thiel circle of things, and Alex Karp is the CEO of Palantir. And we have an interview of him on Bari Weiss's network called The Free Press. And it's Alex Karp's fight for the West. So this is going to be something.
Okay.
Are you ready to fight for the West?
No, in fact.
There is no more apt, appropriate, perfect place for me to be interviewing Alex Karp, one of the most important builders in America and in the West, that at UATX, a school where students...
Oh no,
Holy
it's
cow.
Phrenology University.
I know we don't like to talk about people's appearances, but...
We're not.
Interesting looking guy.
Yeah, he's a weird looking guy. But you know about University of Austin, Texas?
Only where it is, I guess.
Well, that's different than the University of Texas at Austin, just so that you know.
Okay.
So it's not the Texas State University system. It is Bari Weiss's university that at first, when she first launched it, people started like circling everybody that was on the Epstein flight list. And so they had to do a little bit of reshuffling of the staff there. And then I made this meme that said University of Austin at University of Austin, Texas. If the staff there was good enough for the kids at the Epstein Island, good enough for your kids too. And and people got mad.
not just consumers, but where
A thin white t-shirt was a bold choice for him.
Karp, my guest today, is many things. He is a cross-country skier. He is a long-range shooter. He is a Tai Chi expert, and he may be the only person in the world who knows how to wield a sword but doesn't know how to drive. He is also a collector of extremely...
Ma'am, there are people in the world who know how to wield a sword and don't know how to drive.
I'd imagine there's a lot of them, actually.
prestigious degrees. His PhD thesis was called, and I actually have to read this, Aggression in the Life World, the extension of Parsons' concept of aggression by describing the connection between jargon, aggression, and culture. At least that's what I think it was called. I do not speak or write German. He wrote it in German. He's fluent in many languages. Since 2003, Alex has also been the
God damn, did you see that audience?
Palantir, a company that I find very hard to describe in a single sentence, but I'm going to try. Palantir is a software and data analytics company that does defense and intelligence work. If that sounds a little too neutered for you, think of it as a company that stops terror attacks around the world while
by spying on everyone all the time.
Do they actually, though? Like,
They're
stop terrorist attacks?
They're like, remember Blackwater? They're like Blackwater, but for data.
Okay.
also helping make sports cars go faster and pharmaceutical companies build better drugs. We're here today, not just because of Palantir, although we'll talk a lot about it, but because Alex has just co-written an important new book called The Technological Republic, which just debuted at #1 on the...
Do you remember that guy, the fucking person, that monarchist who wants there to be, I forget the guy, Curtis Yarvin. This is a Curtis Yarvin kind of guy.
Mm.
The Technological Republic. Oh, no.
Times bestseller list. The book offers a vision of how Silicon Valley lost its way and how the future of America and the West hinges on its finding its way back and fast. Alex Karp, thank you so much for being here today.
So wait, it was Silicon Valley who lost their way, but it's the entire future of America that's dependent on them finding their way back?
I believe so. I just want you to look at the audience. Look at the fucking audience. Oh my God. This is what you think the audience would look like at a phrenology university.
Yep, a bunch of young white kids.
I see one woman, it looks like.
I think there might be a second.
Oh, I see her. Yeah. There's two.
Hope this is working on it. I am very honored to be here with you.
Tell us about the world you were born into. Jewish father, black mother, leftist household. Tell us about the Karp family and the way that your family shaped you.
Well, I think the primary thing in my family, so my family, my mother, father, but also extended family are, you could imagine like something like the physics department at Princeton meets an art colony. So my mom was a professional artist, and my dad is a pediatrician for underserved communities. But the larger family is kind of a caricature of a very talented, very high IQ. And then what is super interesting was
Just the whole family is a caricature of very talented and very high IQ. What the
Of
shit does that
a
mean?
very talented and very high IQ.
pretty, I mean, in retrospect, we didn't have a lot of money, but we were very focused on intellectual and historical rigor to the point of almost I wanted to vomit all the time. And I was interested in some of this, but it was like super overkill.
Give me an example of like dinner table conversation.
Well, first of all, there's my mom has, she's 85 now, but she has an encyclopedic knowledge of almost any irrelevant fact you could ever want to know.
What?
So, like, it might be like, people used to call and they're like, oh, we're having a tour guide at Bryn Mawr. Nobody knows who the architect was of this building. But we knew one person would know, and my mom, of course, would know, and it would be like a 40-minute lecture. And then...
So that's not the dinner table. That's a phone call.
There probably would be some discussion that was kind of political about...
I mean, with a kid like him, I'd be looking for any excuse to get out of 40 minutes of that dinner, too.
Discussion that was kind of political about... they of course, I remember vividly telling my parents, but Reagan seems like such a nice person. They're like, you're wrong! So, a lot of discussions about ethics, human rights, literature, to some extent math. My dad's very mathematical. It was exceedingly intellectual, very Jewish, and my mom became Jewish, but it wasn't really, it's just like everyone there was. And then
So high IQ and intellectual, but you were dyslexic forever.
Yeah, no, I'm like, I was in the closet. It's funny, I should be in the closet about my social life and when I was younger and all sorts of other things, but I never was. But I was in the closet about being dyslexic until 7-8 years ago. And then I don't know, I just felt tired of being in the closet about it. And yeah, I was very, very good at certain things and dyslexic at things. There are many different...
So wait a minute. Well, the first of all, the way I was good at certain things, but dyslexic about other things. That's not really... I'm not a dyslexia expert, but I don't think that that's how it works. I think that and I don't know enough about it. I just feel like the way that he's talking about it seems incorrect.
Also, correct me if I'm wrong, but like, if you're saying I'm like in the closet about something, it's something that's generally has like a social cost to coming out of the closet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like no one knows my shoe size, but I'm not going to say I'm in the closet about my shoe size. It's just irrelevant. You know what I mean?
You know, there might have been, I don't know, this guy's a little bit older. I think he's like, 10 years older than me, maybe? Like mid to late 50s, probably. And maybe when he was a kid, there was, any kind of, any kind of mental difference or whatever. They would use the R word for you, right? They'd just call you that. So there might have been when he was a kid, but I'm assuming by the time 7 or 8 years ago, yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of social cost to telling people that you have dyslexia. Maybe
yeah, especially if he's like already a CEO.
Right. Yeah, there
like
wasn't
a major
whole lot
company.
of social cost to that.
Dyslexia, my current fixation on is having an attenuated...
I don't know, maybe I'm wrong here.
Current fixation on is having an attenuated relationship to broader taxonomies. So, and then I was lucky to be in an environment where they were like, hey, there's something wrong here. And then I got help and then I ended up doing very well in lots of things. But yeah, I have a very different structure than the rest of my family. They're born to be in a lab or in a art colony, and I did very well in academia, but I am actually a builder. And that attenuation to larger structures means the disadvantage is that when you're reading and writing, you are bringing extra energy.
When he says builder, he means like a builder of like systems and companies and stuff. He doesn't mean like buildings.
Yeah, I mean, I presume this is just what every like rich asshole says they are. I'm a builder. I built this company. That's
yeah.
He's that builder.
But like that is incredibly common in academia, right?
Right, to be building systems. I mean, it depends like what he was studying or whatever, which he's probably not going to tell us, but I fucking don't care anyway, I suppose. But yeah, you're right. In academia, there are a lot of people who build new systems, new frameworks, or maybe not build new systems and new frameworks, but build on top of what is known about systems and frameworks and stuff. That's sort of the point of academia in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So like when he says, he's more of a builder than doesn't fit into academia, it's like, you're just wrong. You would absolutely fit into academia in that way.
As evidenced by the fact that he says he did really well, which I don't, I have no reason not to believe.
Yeah.
Have to bring if you were not dyslexic. The advantage I have, if you want to make it, I usually just explain it as the attenuation allows you to be creative. But since we're in an academic audience,
I don't know. You're at the phrenology fucking university. The fucking broccoli-headed Nazis everywhere.
there's a combination. There's a concept of hermeneutics, which is just a fancy way of saying what overlay do you put on the thing that you're interacting with. This, in this case, a text. And so the classic, and there are lots of discussions which you may be reading, but it's a pretty important part of Germanic intellectual tradition, the hermeneutic tradition, and you can think of dyslexia as.
So this guy likes to talk in a way that seems like it's inaccessible because he's using a lot of like words that most people don't know. You can pick it up in context, right? But this is like one of the things we talk about on this show is that people will use. I call them like smarty pants words when other words would do just fine. And it's to signal to their audience that they're a genius. And he's doing that a lot here.
Yep.
He keeps using the word attenuation, which I mean, I know what that means, right? I mean, I'm into audio production. You have to know what attenuation means if you're into audio production. That is one of the core components of dynamics processing. But the way he's using it here, he's using the word. Somebody in chat noticed that he likes the word. It feels like it's one of those words that he like maybe grabs onto when he's in situations where he feels like he needs to be an intellectual. And it's interesting, and I find it like obnoxious. Like at a dinner party, if somebody's talking like this guy, friend, find someone else to talk to at the dinner party. Especially because this guy
could be
might
also like compensation. Like maybe he doesn't. As a child, he didn't feel like people viewed him as intelligent,
right?
And now he's like learned to compensate for that,
right? But it's so interesting that the people who do this are almost always like people who are like incredibly like financially successful. You know what I'm saying? And it may just be that we're exposed to that because of the kind of content that we consume here, but like in the real world, I think if people are like trying to signal to you that they're smart, they don't do this because people figure out in the real world among normal people that this is just fucking insufferable. And so in normie culture, right, the way you signal to people that you're smart is you like crack smart jokes and shit, right? You make people laugh, you connect things maybe that aren't connected but in a funny way. Like these are just sort of ways that like at least when I'm talking to new people, I'm like, oh, this guy's pretty funny, right? Because he's like, or this gal's pretty funny because they're like cracking jokes and maybe making me think about things in a new way. Not like what this guy's doing. He's also almost taking like basic concepts or concepts we already understand and trying to make them inaccessible through like esoteric language or through like, I mean, the word attenuate isn't really esoteric, but he keeps using it where other words would be just fine, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Hermeneutic, because I have to engage with the text with an interpretive layer that allows me to actually understand and process the text in the way that you don't. But then no,
I think we all have to engage with, especially with new text, new ideas, with a layer that maybe somebody else doesn't have to. This isn't necessarily a function of dyslexia. Like if you and I are going to read a book, you and I are both going to have to do different, maybe if it's like a technical book or whatever, outside of our main areas that we have knowledge in, right? You or I are going to have to use different frameworks and put different kind of layers of thought in between the text and like the part of our mind that understands for us to understand it. I think everybody has to do this. This isn't special about him. This is how you read a textbook.
Yeah, I mean, most people, myself included, just take notes on what they read, right? And that's kind of exactly what he's talking about here.
Right. The notes act as a layer where you're not, if you're taking notes in an academic setting, you're doing it to like remember the key facts. But I think after that, I think you're taking notes, and a lot of times people are doing it almost to explain what they're reading to themselves so that they can go back and look at their notes and kind of see like what they've already explained to themselves about the thing they're trying to absorb.
Yeah. Which is, different for like a novel. If I'm reading a novel, I'm not going to take notes on it. But I don't think that's what he's talking about here.
No, he's talking about absorbing information from textbooks. We would say,
yeah.
or maybe scientific studies or whatever he might be talking about. But yeah, taking notes is a layer that a lot of people use. Absolutely.
Yep.
This is the text actually becomes you. It's like the famous Hegelian master-slave dialectic, which I think you should read if you haven't, but it's basically the basic thing is the slave becomes the master becomes the slave. And you see this in businesses all the time. One of the things I think, like typically in a business, people hire staff instead of equals. And they like that because the staff says yes all the time. But then the person in charge gets addicted to the person saying yes all the time. In fact, the people that your staff becomes your master. And you see this, but it's much, much harder to create that dynamic if you're
staff instead of equals. Does he just mean like yes men?
Well, I just wonder what it's like at a meeting with this guy if you think this guy's off base too. Do you know what I'm saying? If this guy's underling and he's like 105% sure that he's right, oh boy, I bet this guy like starts throwing a bunch of fucking smarty pants words at you.
Yeah. Like, am I incorrect in my thinking of the word staff? The definition is just like someone, like your subordinate at work, right? That's your staff.
And people
or
work
like
for
someone
you.
who does something for you.
Yeah. So they're like in the corporate structure, if they're your staff, by definition, they're below you in the corporate structure. Now, I don't think he means that. I think he means that these people he wants to hire people who he thinks are his intellectual equals or whatever. So I bet there's a lot of white dudes at Palantir. Like a lot of white dudes at Palantir.
Well, like the word staff doesn't have any bearing on like how intellectual someone is, right?
Right, of course. They just are you are their supervisor essentially. Or they report to you or whatever.
Yeah, they might be heaps smarter than you.
As much as I would like to interact one-to-one with the underlying text, I can't, or the underlying business, or the underlying business plan, or the way you're supposed to build a software company, or the way you're supposed to build a relationship. And this is, but yeah, I was the odd duckling in my family, although my dad is actually kind of slightly dyslexic and my uncle is slightly dyslexic, but not as pronounced, like I got the full-on dosage.
But you have the full-on dosage of having a really hard time reading and writing. Yet you go to college, then you go to Stanford Law School, then you go and get a PhD at Goethe University, which is famous, of course, for the Frankfurt School, a group of Marxist intellectuals, sort of.
Yeah, I mean,
fair way of describing them.
The origin of the again, this I'm doing the book behind the book here. So since we're
going to get to the book in a second.
No, we don't have to get the book.
No, I've wanted to ask you
No, I want to hear them talk about the fucking Frankfurt School. I want to hear how JQy they get about this, especially with this guy being Jewish and with Bari Weiss being Jewish.
Respect most about Marxism?
Well, the Frankfurt School isn't fake. It's not actually Marxist. It's the Frankfurt School.
Oh, let's see if he gets this right, because the Frankfurt School, it's postmodern. They're postmodernists, so they're going to be critical of the grand narratives of something like Marxism, even if some of them themselves pick up parts of Marxism as part of their personal ideology. If he's not going to get this right. He's not going to get this right. But maybe he does. Maybe he does get this right. I'm guessing not.
I mean, there's a definitional question of who started it, but generally people would say Horkheimer or Adorno, but a lot of people would include Benjamin from others. And so it's like any school. It's actually elliptical. The modern version of it is actually neo-Kantian and pro-American. I mean, as much as you're allowed to be as a German intellectual. And so I was particularly interested in the second phase of the Frankfurt School. So
nobody's that interested in, if you're a German and you're pro-American, people don't care that much about that. In fact, people probably don't even care that much if you're pro-German after a certain amount of time after the war, because the structure of Germany changed dramatically after the war. So I don't know what this guy's talking about. This is crazy. He didn't even attempt to describe the philosophy and the makeup of the Frankfurt School. I would have never had to fucking look that shit up myself either, except for this show.
And actually, Habermas and then a very famous thinker, Luhmann, who I don't know how much I should go detail you want, but you're at a university, so
we don't need to get like deep into.
Okay, so
You're like kind of at a university.
I was super interested.
we want to get to like killing terrorists.
Great, I'm happy to talk about that, and I'm proud of that. And you should, having pride in occasionally using violence is one of the main things that our universities have screwed up. It is in the service of our nation and with great thought. And
damn, what's going on here? Like, fucking union camera people wouldn't come fucking work for them for whatever reason, man.
The ethics of war, which America does, sometimes you have to kill the other side. It's a fact, and it's not always a bad thing. But but on the Frankfurter School side, so
Frankenfurter, like a hot dog.
It really was, first of all, Benjamin was actually a poet, and I don't think he was in any way. So, and Horkheimer and Adorno were kind of actually closer to Heideggerian. So it really, like their whole idea of a ratcheting bureaucracy taking over our life might be familiar to us. And then the later people, especially Luhmann. Luhmann is the most important figure no one reads in German thought. And Luhmann was built on Parsons, and Parsons was this incredibly important thinker that got banned because he wasn't willing to be left-wing, basically. And the Parsonian way of looking at the universe was taken over by Germans and is absolutely essential for any work you do in Germany. Luckily, because of Harvard, which Harvard was, I knew a lot about Parsons. And so that was why I was a super hit in Germany, because I was a technical expert in something very important that no one had ever understood. But by the way, this is a lesson for life. If you're a technical expert in something that is important to somebody, the two people in the world who are most important in the world, and probably Luhmann's no longer alive, but if they would be, had a fixation on this one thinker that no one was reading because it wasn't politically left enough. Lo and behold, I was the only person they could talk to that knew more about that than they did, which is actually hard with Habermas and with Luhmann, because they just like these. Another lesson from academia that I would say, like, Germany's got a lot of problems, but when I was there, I dealt with the best of the best of the best of the best, and that taught me I was good enough to be a professor at Columbia in a tenure, but I was not going to be them. And by the way,
pause. Why? You were good enough, but you weren't going to be them. You didn't want to be them?
First of all, I didn't. That's the thing. Couldn't be them because of the dyslexia. Honestly, like, it was like, to be Luhmann, you have to write a book every 3 months, and a world-class book. And he had read everything, and the attenuation with the language. It wasn't just a German thing, but I was writing in German.
See that attenuation there. Again, he could have just said that I have problems with language. It takes me longer to deal with language, but he keeps using this word attenuation. I think it's one of those words that he thinks makes him sound smart. I think, like you were saying, like maybe people have in the past assumed that he's dumb, and so he like latched onto a couple words that he thought were like indicators of his own intelligence or his own like well-readness or whatever.
Mm-hmm. That was going to create huge problems. And also, I discovered in talking to these people, they're not builders. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to explain this way, but I figured out pretty quickly, they're better at reading and writing, and also, but I'm better at building. And then the thing I thought vividly that I think has turned out to be completely true is, and again, this goes back to point one, the building of the idea is more important than the academic version of the idea.
Wait, what?
I mean, sometimes, not always.
But I'm not sure where the distinction is there.
I guess there's kind of a similar saying in software development. It's code wins arguments. You can talk about the idea, but that's not really important until you put it into practice, I guess is what he's saying. But like, again, that's not always true. Sometimes you can put it into practice and do it poorly, and then you'll have to go back to the drawing board.
And it's also like the building of the idea, he said, is more important than the academic version of it. But like, first of all, this idea that you build an idea, It's just a fucking. I feel like this is again like an overly complicated and like pedantic way to talk about like new ideas or reworking of old ideas in a new way. I can't quite explain it. It just strikes me as that there's like it's a performance. I mean, I know he's on a stage, right? So there's some degree of what I do that is a performance. I understand that, but this is like annoying. This is right. This is fucking obnoxious.
I think maybe what he's saying is he's not an ideas man. He can take an idea and build it, but he can't come up with the idea. Maybe, I don't know. He would probably disagree with that. So I'm misinterpreting that.
Really important to build and win, and you could have long discussions about how the world should be structured with Luhmann, Habermas, or Gadamer if you could meet any of these incredible thinkers. But I thought somewhat arrogantly I had a rare ability to build. God knows why I thought it. There was no evidence, but I did think that, and I thought, screw this, I can build the fucking idea.
But how did you realize that in yourself? Like even.
But I mean, he's just wrong here, because like if you go back to a ton of different like competing ideas, sometimes the idea that seems like the right one and you'll just go ahead and build it turns out to be wrong, and you have to go back to academia to figure out like, why is that wrong? Kind of one of the examples off my head is like DC electricity versus AC electricity. Back when we were building out this electric grid, DC seemed to be the way to go. It was simpler, it was easier, but it turns out that DC is really bad for like pushing electricity like tens, hundreds, thousands of miles. And something like AC is much better, but you wouldn't immediately know that unless you did the research and you were academically rigorous about that idea. So like sometimes it's not good to just go in guns blazing and build whatever idea you have. Sometimes it's a lot better to put the investment in the front and think and research about the idea to figure out, is it what we should build?
Right. And also like there's a little bit of like being able to look back on the past and say, well, I'm a great builder because I'm the CEO of Palantir, right? What if his idea, I don't even know if Palantir was originally his company or if he got hired in, I don't know the history, right? But let's say it was originally his company. What if it flopped for whatever reason? What if it flopped? What if people found it, like I do, a bit creepy, right? And so it didn't take off. Then would he have been a great builder? See, it just looks like it's like a rationalization or like a description of who he was before based on who he is today. And
survivorship bias.
Yeah, and a lot of, I don't know if this guy's not a dummy or whatever, I don't think. But like if he would have failed, nobody'd know his name, and then he wouldn't have been a great builder.
Yep.
Like it's weird. Yeah, it's a kind of like a version of survivorship bias. Also like some post hoc reasoning. Like there's a lot of shit that goes into this. And yeah, like a lot of people try to build a company and fail. Are they bad builders, or was it the wrong time? Did they get unlucky? Was nobody willing to invest in them even though their idea was great? Like who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Who fucking knows?
That question. I was not expecting you to go from Adorno to Benjamin to your mind clearly is so interested in those ideas even still now.
Or this is just what he knows he needs to say. Right? Like and I don't know, but what if we watch 20 of this guy's talks? We're not going to. Don't worry, folks. There's not a lot of people watching right now, but check it out. We'll probably not come back to this guy for like a year. But if you watch more of this guy's talks, he always kind of goes in that cycle of these different philosophers or whatever. And maybe it's not that he's that interested in philosophy or even these philosophers. It's that he knows that the Frankfurt School is a thing that people have heard of, and that the people he's mentioning are maybe not the more common people or more, not more common, but more like popular people with more popular ideas. I'm thinking of like Marcuse, right? Who more people know who they are. So if he goes through these like less well-known people in German intellectual, in the German intellectual sphere after World War II, if he goes through the lesser known people, first of all, most people won't know what the fuck he's talking about. And so they'll think he's a genius because they don't know what he's talking about. And the people who do know what he's talking about, they'll identify with that and be like, see, I knew I was a genius like this guy.
Yep.
How do you, given that you had proclivities toward that, how did you realize I can go and run one of the most valuable and mysterious defense companies in the world? How do you go from that to where you are?
We're also crushing it in commercial and the most successful. I just want to say,
he's so modest too.
You know, I do get accused, but you know, one of my heroes is Heinrich Heine, and Heinrich Heine was an incredible poet. There's no reason to learn German, but except for to read Goethe and Heine. And Goethe was essentially like Shakespeare, but he wrote in modern German. So we struggle.
So I feel like what she was trying to do there is say like it's kind of use his position to make him seem very impressive, but recent events, it turns out, have shown that if you are a CEO of a successful company, it does not mean anything about your intelligence, about your ability to run a company. Like it has, in my opinion, you know, you might be a gigantic fucking dumbass and you could run a company successfully.
Like once there's enough money there, I mean, and this is, I guess, a different kind of intelligence, I suppose, is like hiring and delegating, but it seems like one of those kind of hands-on kind of guys too. I don't know. I just know that Palantir is a terrifying organization, and it could only be run by this guy, I think.
Translate it. You don't have the emotional vibe that you would have if it was modern English. Goethe, it's modern English, modern German, but it's Shakespeare. And so valuable. Like I would highly recommend everyone here read Dr. Faustus, and once a year. Like it's the most therapeutic, most insightful piece of literature. But in any case, my other hero was Heinrich Heine, who was a German Jewish poet, was so prominent in German culture that when the Nazis couldn't really get rid of him. And so there were all these things, all these pieces of poetry that they then turned into being anonymous. And he wasn't that modest. So whenever I get accused of being immodest, I think, well, you know, we all have our... classic liberal, by the way. Heinrich Heine was like essentially what you could call a classic, you know, a modern American liberal. But for the academic version of this is having a deep enough understanding of an academic subject, whatever it is, and I don't actually think it matters as much what it sharpens your mind to understand what a plausible argument is. So, like, you know, in business, or, you know, there are many different ways of doing business, by the way, and you'll find the king reflects the court, and there are like some business leaders here I really admire and look up to. I would never know how to run a business the way they do, and we look like a freak show to any normal business person on the inside, and we kind of are, and it works. But there is a thing of like, what is the rigor at which the argument is true? So one of the things you can think about and Wittgenstein, you know, Wittgenstein wrote his first piece of work and sent it in to his advisor. His advisor said, the amazing thing about this is there's nothing in this work that's wrong. So you can think about that. It took Wittgenstein to write a paper where nothing is wrong. And one of the things academia can help, of course, the disaster we have in modern academia is essentially you're learning a religion. But if you were learning academia, the rigor at which an argument or a concept could theoretically be true is a real rigor. Not even that you're right, but that you're not wrong. Mm-hmm. And I think, like, you know, obviously there's a translation function when you know.
What the fuck is he talking about?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm completely lost here. He's like, the rigor at which the argument is plausibly true. So he's just talking about like laying your argument out in a clear and concise way without any fucking logical fallacies, so far as I can tell, or at least that's what I can, well, you don't, it doesn't seem like this argument's wrong because you're not using any fallacious reasoning or whatever. I think this is probably one of these people that he doesn't really care, or maybe like I'm trying to think of how to even say this, but he doesn't care if the shit you're saying is wrong. Is the argument good? And it's like, well, what if it's wrong? What if it's based on a false premise? What if the conclusion is wrong, even though all the steps you took to get there seem normal? Like, This is like the argument, like detached from the foundation it was built upon, and the results that would occur if you were to like implement it. It's almost like it's almost like the argument doesn't exist in the real world in some kind of way. I haven't. I've just like thought that this just occurred to me now, so I haven't really I'm not able to wrap my head around my own head right now, which it might be just a function of what we're watching. I don't know.
Are not particularly interested in having a lecture on Heidegger when they ask me how we should, like for my feedback, which honestly they don't always ask for, and often don't listen to. Like we have Palantirians here; they'll attest to that. We do not have a culture where people follow my orders inherently, but I can mostly convince them. But the rigor of, is this plausibly true, is a rigor that I got at home because the other thing is like, because also interacting and negotiating with two highly intelligent, unusual and difficult people, my parents, and trying to get my way is really hard and builds up a lot of skills.
So is he talking about just like whether something is logically valid?
Right. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like the argument as detached from its from the context in which it exists, almost.
That's not really difficult. Like that's kind of like first year philosophy.
Right, or you learn that maybe just by arguing with people, or by who's pretty good at this making an argument that's where it seems plausible is a con artist.
Yeah, and also an argument can be valid but not sound, and it's still wrong,
right? Or the whole thing could be valid and sound, and it could just be bullshit anyway because it's based on a false premise, or you're just. Or your conclusion from all the argument is some dumb shit like the earth is flat or whatever, right? Like,
yep.
Like in covering conspiracy theories, right? Some of the better conspiracy theorists are ones who can weave what appears to be a really good argument for what they're saying, but what they're saying is just false because people know that it's false, and so like it doesn't matter how good the argument is; it's bullshit, right? Like there's no difference between. I think there's literally no difference between what he's describing here and what a con artist does, what a confidence man, as they would say, does.
Yep.
This is why I think partner selection, by the way, is crazy important, because you want children
in business or romance or both,
in everything, because you need like the rigor of how do you convincing my parents of something, even if I was wrong and they were right, is very hard. So that sets a standard. But then that standard is high, and it's just like convincing a world-class professor who's not politically biased, so the kind of people you have roaming around here, of something.
Nobody at Bari Weiss's IDW University has any political biases. Shut the fuck up. Shut the absolute fuck up. Get the fuck out of here.
Is actually hard, and it's that rigor that actually sets the standard for doing important things in any part of life. And here, where I completely agree with my parents, and it sounds like I have this thing where I'm interested in things that are true but not plausible. So this is a true but not plausible statement. I really believe doing something important is crucially important for fulfillment. So that part's true and plausible.
Doing something important is important.
True.
I mean, yeah, it's fucking circular, but it's like the ice cream cone licking itself,
And I don't believe that the money part of it is more valuable. You just need enough money so you don't have to think about money. And if you stay off meth and you live below your means, you'll have enough money for that probably. And so, but then it's like,
that is such an entitled and privileged thing to say about money.
That is so out of touch. Jesus Christ. Oh, everyone poor. It's because they do meth.
Yeah, somebody in chat said that's a very let them eat cake sort of argument.
Yeah. Oh, you're poor? Stay off the meth.
Right.
Loser.
And it's the other thing is like there's people who are we would call middle class and even upper middle class who have to think about money.
Yeah.
important.
I mean, I get like, it's good advice to live below your means, but like if your means are poverty, you can't live below your means. Living below your means at that point is dying.
Right. Like let's say your means are, $1,200, $1,300 for an apartment, and you can't find an apartment for under $1,550. Well, how do you live below your means in that scenario?
Yep.
How do you live comfortably in that scenario? You don't.
Yep.
And the rigor of what it means to be plausibly right, certainly not wrong, is a skill that will save your life in your career and in your personal life over and over and over.
So in your personal life, if you like have a disagreement, let's say with your partner, and you're like, well, my argument is more plausible, and your partner's like, but you're full of shit. What you're going to do is destroy your relationship over something stupid. Right? Like this guy's like, oh, in your personal things. In your personal things, sometimes you just got to accept that like whoever you're with, if it's your friend, your sister, your fucking, maybe your parents or whatever, just accept that you think they're wrong and they think you're wrong and just fucking move on. It's like that Cat Robichaux song, that Uh-Oh song, right? It's like, what's the worst that could happen if we just kind of went forward, just forgot about this? Like, that's like a way more valuable skill interpersonally than being plausibly right and your argument not being wrong.
Let me explain logically why you're wrong, and then later tonight we can cuddle. What do you mean I have to sleep on the couch?
That was an unintentional segue to your book, because what the book is about, I think the premise of the book is about how Silicon Valley is full of some of the brightest, cleverest minds in the world, and they are focused inordinately on building things to make our lives slightly more luxurious and better, on apps and social and things that will be forgotten.
To make whose life slightly more luxurious and better. Ask a fucking person who drives for DoorDash how that's working out for them.
Yeah, like that's like their stated goal, but no, their goal is to make money.
And the knockoff result of that oftentimes is the bourgeoisie and the rich, right? They end up with slightly more convenient lives through technology, but it leaves everybody else behind.
Yeah, like Facebook, I don't think makes anyone's life better other than the people who work at Facebook.
And not even all of them, right? Like,
yeah.
I would assume being a black woman who's a software engineer at Facebook is probably torturous and you're just there for the fucking money, right? I'm assuming you're not getting the kind of respect you deserve, right? Like,
yeah.
And there's people who, as like an event promoter or whatever, Facebook makes it easier for me to reach the audience I'm trying to reach. Well, at least it used to. Now they fucking rug pulled all the artists, musicians and everything. But for, that kind of thing has the potential, to make it easier for people to get together, for people to put on events, for people to maybe hire someone to do work that they might not be able to find somewhere else. But it doesn't function that way, because the way that makes money for the investors is for it to be a fucking outrage machine. Yep. And that doesn't also really make our lives better.
That's very, I get she didn't say, other companies aren't doing that. But like, honestly, I value like the roofing company down the street. I value that a lot more than a company like Uber. Because I'd rather have a roof over my head than be able to call a car from an app on my phone. Like they didn't make anyone's lives better. We could already call a car from our phone. We would just have to dial a number.
And the taxi companies, I think, would have eventually built that functionality in, and some of them already
probably
were.
Yeah.
and they're unmoored from a broader national project. Tell us a little bit more about that thesis, and more to the point, how that happened. How did if the pretext of the book is Silicon Valley lost its way, and you could look at something like the Manhattan Project, the marriage there between tech and government, as the
But the Manhattan Project was a government project.
high watermark. How did, and then we'll talk about Doge and maybe how Doge is trying to remarry those two things, but how did Silicon Valley lose its way
Doge has one goal. It's to make Elon Musk more money.
of having a sense of purpose beyond really the market and beyond these little companies? How did it become unmoored from a sense of a broader commitment to America and the West?
Well, there's a lot to that question, and I think, I don't know exactly where to begin, but
Start with what it should look like.
well, I think, and again, this is where I'm super into academia still. The classic positivist way to look at the world is that, you'll have something like the value of an object will be measured by the market, and the value of the object will have, its value will correspond. It'll be something called Pareto optimality, which I'm sure you guys spend time thinking about here.
Have you guys heard of that?
Yeah, they love that. This is a conservative school.
Bari Weiss accidentally just fronted this guy off, right? She threw him under the bus. She was like, does anybody know what the fuck he means?
Also, he just kind of threw some shade at conservatives.
Fair enough.
He's like, the thing that people talk about in school isn't what you're talking about in your school because you're all conservatives. So, you only talk about conservative things.
Oh, I caught it the other way. I caught it that he was heaping praise on conservatives for talking about
He was
things
trying
in another
to.
way.
He was trying to, but he accidentally threw shade at conservatives.
But it's
Because, what's better, to know something that, you don't agree with, or to only know things that you agree with?
Well, ideally, you know both.
Yeah, right?
that this is a conservative school. But it's basically the market is fair, and I believe that, and there's an AI riff on this, but I think that true talent, management of talent. So let me do the management of talent for you. How do you avoid becoming a sophist, successful person who's super unhappy? Which should be let's assume everyone here can be successful. I think you want to do endeavors that are larger than yourself, that are more meaningful than yourself, and where that endeavor probably can't be fully monetized. And some people have that in their personal life, some people have that in their professional life. I'm pretty skeptical. This is where of the idea that the market
That's actually kind of rare for a rich guy to say that things are worth doing even if they don't make money.
I think it's actually, depending on the context, I think it's a privilege, right? Once you have a whole bunch of money, you're free to pursue your fucking interests, even in your career, because, so what if you get fired, right?
Yeah.
Skeptical. This is where of the idea that the market is rational, and that the market will price things in terms of their true value. And so it was better for our society, and ergo better for everyone in the society.
I mean, that's speculative investment kind of blows that out of the water.
Well, he hasn't finished yet. I think he's going to say that the market isn't fair and that the market doesn't always produce the best results. I think.
Okay, I just don't know if anyone believes that. I think he's trying to say that this is what people believe, and I don't think that that's true, because no one would agree that the market never overvalues or undervalues things.
And so, it was better for our society, and ergo better for everyone in the society, to have our most technical people building things that were both good for government and good for society. But it's much more difficult, and it's much more dangerous to build them. And and then again, I think what's in the book that I think our educational institutions have really done us a disservice. One of the reasons I wanted to come here was, and what is that disservice? Well, the primary disservice was somehow teaching people that it's better to believe in nothing than into something. Whatever that something is. Like, what you're really learning at an elite school is, there's the world is already understandable, and you should just follow this preordained arc. And that preordained arc has a set of steps where you say you believe in something, but actually you believe in your self-advancement. And then I think what happened in Silicon Valley, by the way, there's been, again, testament to America, a huge shift. I think, it's like, and that's partly because the ideas changed, but quite frankly, somewhat ill-modestly, it's because Palantir did so well, and now other companies are doing very well, and people see, well, I can do something that has a higher purpose and make money.
But the problem is that Palantir is the higher purpose is basically monetizing and enabling the military-industrial complex through data. That's what Palantir does. Not just the military-industrial complex, but like the prison industrial complex, the fucking cops, like law enforcement. These are their clients mostly, and so they're like enabling power to either project or maintain its power. And so I'm not sure if that's like I'm not sure if that's like a good higher calling.
Turning people into skeletons?
If they're lucky, or I don't know, I guess they're dead, so they don't care.
Yeah.
So, and that, again, I'm not arguing for a non-free enterprise, because like, if you couldn't make money building Palantir or other defense tech startups, the idea would be an idea they study in some faculty by people who can't get a job. And, but I think we went way
faculty is not a job.
I think he means again, he's using I don't think he meant like the faculty at a university, right? I think he meant to say an idea that you study in some form or whatever. But again, it's again, the way that he uses language, it's like sort of my takeaway from this is that this guy like he uses language to try to sound smart. And I think it fools a lot of people. I'm not saying he's not smart. I'm saying that like, I'm saying that he's a confidence man, and the people he's trying to gain trust or admiration from are people who are generally susceptible to what he's doing. That's how it works, I think.
Okay.
We are going to build things in the easiest way possible, and those things are at the margin going to be detrimental for our society. But the other way academia really screwed us was, I think it's very hard to build things if you don't have a hierarchical notion of what's good and bad. Like, why would you build something for the U.S. and our nation if all nations are equal? Or our nation is worse than other nations? Why would you take...
Because you live in this one?
Build something.
Right, because that's who your clientele is going to be if you're a defense contractor. Like, it's not very likely that you're going to be in California and doing defense contract work for, I don't know, China. In fact, I think that's fucking treason, right?
Yep.
I think that is incredibly illegal.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd imagine, like, I don't view America in any sort of like special way. America's like, I don't know, kind of I don't want to say an average country, because like in some ways America's better and in some ways America's worse than a lot of other countries. But like, I would still want to like build something for the United States because that's where I live.
And again, in his field, they execute you if you build the kind of shit he's building for example, North Korea.
Yep.
Something hard and difficult you might fail at, that would advance our defense if you're defending if our culture and the people we're defending ourselves against are as good, as rational, as moral, as likely to behave rationally, as willing to protect the rights of various groups that have received discrimination. Why would you do that? And the obvious answer is you would only do that if you're a zealot or insane, and that's why the reaction to us in the beginning was so negative.
Okay, so does that mean that when the United States starts to disrespect people's rights and remove them, he would want to attack the United States? Is that what he's saying?
It's interesting because Palantir has been integral in taking away people's rights. I know you don't really have a right to privacy, right? Because it's nowhere really. California has, some states have some privacy laws, but they're pretty weak. But like this guy's company does a lot of work to take away people's rights, especially in its work with law enforcement. So
yeah, what he's saying right now does not comport with his actions.
And he's saying at the beginning right here, this is going to be interesting because he's like, at the beginning, Palantir got all this flack or whatever. Check this out.
And that's why the reaction to us in the beginning was so negative, because like we were calling into question the very hierarchy of norms, meaning non-hierarchy of norms that powered the decisions people were making. And then you could ask, getting to these, why have we had such a corrosion of legitimacy into like, one of the things I like to ask people who in private rooms who are defending things I don't think are defensible, and I ask these people, okay, I'm a kind of reformed, old school liberal progressive who's very unhappy and now had to leave like the Democratic Party and whatever, but I ask them in private, name an institution that's run by the things you believe in that actually works. Any institution where works is less is put into the system that goes out. And the answer always is basically, I don't accept your frame.
Yeah, I don't accept the frame either. For something to be good, it doesn't mean that it has to like give more than it takes or whatever. Like,
what does that mean?
So he's probably making the argument that Palantir is one of the good organizations that gives more than it takes or whatever. I suppose, maybe. But like the other thing is like he's not asking really a question about like numbers and facts. He's asking a philosophical question. We're sort of baked into the question, at least in his mind, is that people who disagree with him are going to only support institutions that don't do that, because a function of, I guess, the woke or the left or whatever, it's kind of what I think he's saying is that we like things that don't create good outcomes, or we like things that take more than they give or whatever. And so he's not really asking you the question that it sounds like he's asking. He's like basically asking you to defend like your own beliefs on terms that only he really understands, but needs you to abide by. And I don't know if I'm saying that right or whatever. I don't know if I'm being like clear in what I mean here, but it's like, it's like you explain to me in a way that I am going to accept why you're right and I'm wrong. Well, that's fucking stupid. Because now the bar to entry is that you accept that you're wrong, even though you're sure that you're right. This guy must be so much fun at parties.
The way, one of the most disingenuous, like the number of times because I love to have these fights kind of in private rooms where people can be more honest. I like that. And I try and run into very famous people. And I ask them about like all sorts of things, like, how can you possibly accept, my favorite rant obviously is, you built a party or an institution, universities, other universities. The primary focus of universities in the last 20 years has been anti-discrimination. Good. I'm not in favor of non-meritocratic discrimination.
The primary focus of universities?
They all say this. This is like the thing they've been banging on. He means woke, right? He means the wokeness, the idea of like. But
if you go to like harvard.edu, on their homepage, it's not going to be like, hey, we're an organization dedicated to DEI. No, they're a fucking university. They're dedicated to teaching.
Some might say increasingly the endowment, right? through their alumni.
I mean, sure. But like, their product is like they're a business and their product is education.
Good.
You know, when you go and buy something from them, you're not buying DEI, you're buying education. You know, DEI is like, it's on that list, but it's pretty far down.
The primary focus of universities in the last 20 years has been anti-discrimination. Good. I'm not in favor of non-meritocratic discrimination, nor is anyone I've ever met, like in favor of discrimination. Okay, well, if you're so not in favor of discrimination, how can you accept discrimination against a people that has the longest history of discrimination in the history of humanity? And
oh no. Okay, so first of all, for his premise here, you have to agree that there is some sort of meritocracy, like that's almost like separate, right? That's like not based on the decisions of people in power, because right, people in power are who decides who has merit. When the rubber meets the road here, and he's also saying that like he's going to basically say that he's going to run this line that like Jewish folks are being discriminated against in university admissions. They'll use Jewish folks or Asian folks, and the end of that is that these people are being discriminated against because you're letting too many black people in who don't have what we're going to call merit, which is again the merit as defined by the ruling class, which is for all of our history largely excluded black folks. They're not the ones deciding what the merit is at Harvard, right? So
I think he's talking specifically about pro-Palestinian protesters, right?
Maybe. But I don't think, because he's talking about over the last 20 years, I don't think he's talking about that. In fact, I think this guy's not going to touch that shit with a 10-foot pole.
Okay.
But yeah, he's talking about admissions, and he's going to say that like Jewish people are being discriminated against in admissions because universities, one of the missions of a university, and I think it's a good mission, would be to be demographically reflective of the society in which it exists, to the extent that it can be.
Also, I think that if you're going to measure merit, if you're going to try and put a number on someone's merit, quote unquote, if you don't take into account the hardships that they faced in their life, your measurement is meaningless. Like if you're like, okay, we're going to find out who the fastest runner is. Go ahead and run this football field. We're going to start you on the 90-yard line, and we're going to start you all the way back in the other end zone.
Right. And I mean, maybe running's a bad example because you can tell who's faster between two people. Though, I don't know.
Yeah, but if the guy who started on the 90-yard line finishes first, it's because he had a fucking huge head start.
Yeah, no, I understand. I just like this idea of like merit is we're getting pretty close to this to IQ here, essentially, the way this guy's talking about merit. I feel like he's not going to, I don't think, again, he's probably not going to touch that shit with a 10-foot pole either, but he's getting pretty close to like standardized testing and grades as the entrance qualifications for university. Yeah. And universities are considering other things when they admit people, because they found that when they admit people based just on standardized testing and grades, that they get a pretty homogenous group of people. And I mean, good on them, I suppose. Although a lot of them have taken that language out of their off of their websites and stuff, because the pendulum seems to be swinging the other way in this country right now.
Unfortunately, yeah.
The answer is, I don't accept your frame. If he is like, okay, well, how can you possibly tacitly defend Hamas? I don't accept.
Oh, he went. Nope. Okay, so
he was.
You were right. He was talking about like but the problem. Okay, there's a couple problems here. One, like a lot of the student groups that are protesting against the Likud party, the governing coalition of the nation state of Israel, and their behaviors. A lot of those are head up by Jewish students and Jewish student groups, because they're Americans. They don't feel any loyalty to the nation state of Israel, maybe like their parents might, or maybe their parents might.
And I'm just gonna say again, even though we've said it in the past, I do want to clarify just because you are pro-Palestinian does not mean you are pro-Hamas.
And the thing that that I've said over and over again is, you don't know if you were living under this occupation since the moment you were born, you don't know how you would feel about a group like Hamas. That's
true. Yeah.
Your frame. How can you explain that, I quoted, like, judge them by the fruits they bear. How can you explain your ideology where there's not a single institution that you can say in private, no one's putting you on the spot in public, that you believe is actually working by the very basic standard that you put in 2 units out, you get 2.5. You put in 2 units.
Yeah, we reject this framing because not everything is about putting units in and getting units out.
I mean, here's a good one. School lunch programs.
Right. All you get out of that is food.
No, I mean, school lunch programs, absolutely, you get more out of what you put in.
Welfare in general, because the money, you give poor people the money, and according to like whatever economic theory that's like prevailing or whatever, that money circulates through the community and it goes from place to place to place to place to place and creates economic activity. But I think if you, and I don't know, I wonder who he's having these conversations with. Because the other thing is like if somebody asks, like, does he ask people what their ideology is? Because I might have a hard time answering the fucking question. If somebody's like, what's your ideology? Tell me real quick. I might have be like, what the fuck are you asking me this for? Right? Because I'm not a communist. I'm not a socialist. I'm not like a fucking neoliberal. Like, I don't know. I have to take a bunch of acid and think about it for 3 days, I suppose.
The 2 units. And the answer is, I don't accept your frame. And now, what's fascinating to me and is in the book is, in most cases,
I mean, if it's just about return on investment, then they're like, yeah, basically any form of welfare gets you a return on investment.
Right, but I wonder if the kinds of people he's talking to aren't going to think about welfare because they're all rich, and so that's not going to really come up. But even so, just building a road.
Yeah.
Like how the fuck do people get to work at Palantir? They go on the road. Well, if somebody built that a long time ago and it's been useful, right?
Social works programs, infrastructure projects, absolutely huge return on investment on all of those.
Because they're doing this thing that you will encounter everywhere in your life, and something that academia, and I think actually my book can help protect against, which is they are actually a product of some ideology. They become a product of some ideology that presupposes a universalistic, undiscussable presupposition behind which there's a grift.
I suppose you could say like the things that maybe he's targeting are like arts programs, because like there's not going to be a demonstrable return on investment by like, teaching people the arts. But like, I don't know about him personally, but I don't really want to live in a country that has no value for the arts.
I'd be willing to bet he's talking more about like things like women's studies or queer studies or critical theory as it relates to race and history, that kind of stuff. But I'm just guessing again here. And the thing is, if he's saying that like, oh, you asked this question and somebody goes, I don't really accept the premise or I don't accept your framing. Well, the obvious next thing that a person would do in a conversation be like, well, why don't you accept the framing? And then you might listen to why they don't accept the framing.
Yeah.
And this guy's manner of speech is kind of all over the place. It kind of reminds me of Austin Bennett almost in some ways. But it's like, if somebody doesn't accept the premise of what you're telling them, you should ask them why. You might then understand a little bit more about why people don't accept the thing that you're saying or don't think that the thing you're saying is worthwhile. And then you might, maybe not change your mind or whatever, but you maybe be able to have a little more nuance or a little more understanding even of what you believe as a result of having this conversation where someone tells you why they don't accept the premise that you're operating under. Like,
yep. Every time I ask these liberals, when did you stop beating your wife? They say, I don't accept the framing of your question. So like, obviously I have to conclude that every liberal beats their wife.
Right. It's a version of that, right? Yeah, that's the simplest version of it. Or when did you stop fucking mainlining cocaine? You're like, dude, I've never done cocaine in my life. If I said that would be a lie, but I've never injected it. I don't like needles. They're stabby. I'll get vaccines, but
and that presupposition that they will not allow, that it becomes religious in the sense that you can't.
Yeah, but you have a presupposition. You're telling us that because you're saying that when you ask a question, somebody's saying, I don't really agree with the presuppositions that you have. That's what you mean when you say, I don't accept the framing. This is so crazy. It's like, I have presuppositions when I ask this question. And then the reason they don't agree with the question or the way that I'm framing it is because they have presuppositions. It's like, no shit. People are different, dude. Good job. Fucking congratulations. Here's a gold star and a few $1 billion. What the fuck, dude?
Problematize it in academic language, and not academic language would be discuss it, creates a system where the dysfunction of the institution does not matter because the dysfunction cannot be discussed outside the frame which they defined, which cannot be called into question. And the whole institution is sinking, and you still can't mention it. And this is like, and this is, I think, what classic education prevents. It prevents you from becoming the product.
One thing that you've talked about a lot is this idea.
What does he mean by classic education?
I think he mean, I don't know. Does he mean like the current paradigm, or does he mean like some nostalgized paradigm of education that he thinks was better before? I don't fucking know.
Maybe he just wants to go back to a time that never existed.
Pagan religion. Why do you think it has been so seductive to people, and why has it succeeded?
Like, I hate to break it to him, but there have always been progressives.
Blossom over at least the past 2 decades at conquering pretty much all of academia, pretty much all of the legacy press, and we could go on and on and on. Why has it been so effective if it's so morally corrupt? Today, I mean, just today, like.
But now you're presupposing morals, right? We're talking about like,
yeah.
And like, we do this, we all presuppose things, the ethics and morality. We have to, like, at some point, you have to ask yourself what you think is right, and that's where your ethics and morality comes from. This may evolve. People may ask you questions or give you new information where you change your moral and ethical framework over your life. In fact, I hope everyone does. I hope that's an experience everyone has, so that they can have a little bit of fucking humility, so they don't end up being like, well, you're presupposing something that makes the fucking question I'm asking impossible for you to answer because you don't like my framing because you're wrong. Well, now you're the one, you're the one who hasn't, like, you're the one not showing any epistemic humility, as these people like to say. You're the one not showing any ability to be flexible, any ability to reason with people. You're operating from your own fucking, like, it's this deontological shit that fucking Tim Pool likes to use and abuse when he talks, where it's like, well, I have these core principles and they're right because I say they're right. And it's like, well, that's fine. I have core principles that are right because I say they're right. Now, what do we do? Do we box? Do you want to box? What do we do? What do we do? And he's like, actually, I'm going to drone strike you. I work for Palantir. Nice apartment building you used to live in. Like,
yeah, what she basically said is like, why does everyone disagree with me if I'm so convinced that I'm right?
And that's fine. And it's not everyone either. There's plenty of people who disagree with her. Or agree with her. She's able to, like, make a living doing this. So there's plenty of people who agree with her too. Otherwise she wouldn't be able to make a living doing this, right? She makes a good living doing this.
I should say, why does everyone else disagree with us if we're so convinced that we're right?
Yeah, and it's like, well, that's because that's everyone else, not the in group. That's the out group in your, like, world. And we all think about things that way, but it's when people start acting like that they have the pure and moral ethics, well, those people are terrifying. Those people end up involved in authoritarian projects like Palantir.
Yep.
As the Bebas children were being buried with their mother in Israel, at Barnard College, one of the most expensive schools, one of the most elite schools in the country, you had students taking over a building, basically, covered in cheering for Hamas would be a polite way to put it.
Except
so first of all, they weren't cheering for Hamas. Secondly, like, where is her outrage for all the Palestinian kids that got turned into skeletons?
See, like, I feel like I have a pretty moderate position on this one, and I'm going to say it again. And I'm not sure I've ever said it on the pod here. Definitely said it when the lights were red. After the Hamas attack, the first day was the first day of military action by the IDF. I would call a response. By the end of the second week, we would be at the end of the revenge stage, right? Okay, now a couple weeks, okay, you're doing a revenge. After a couple weeks of revenge, now we're doing something else, right? Now we're trying to do ethnic cleansing. So
I'm going to take a bold stance, and I hope you agree with this stance, that killing children is wrong.
Right, absolutely. And so what was going on, to the best of my understanding, at the protests did start happening immediately after October 7th. And I think the protests started happening because people saw the writing on the wall. They knew what was coming. They didn't know that it would still be happening now, right? But they knew what was coming because of the language being used by the IDF and and to some extent the United States after that attack. So people started protesting because they knew what was coming. They knew.
I think part of it too was a lot more people became more aware of what Israel has been doing for the past 7 decades.
Yeah, the entire time. And so, but I don't think you could find somebody somewhere that supports Hamas. It might be a Palestinian person. Again, if I was under this occupation, if somebody had occupied Oakland, right, and there was a group that was fighting them, and they were calling this group a terrorist organization. Well, if I was under the occupation here in Oakland, I might have a different opinion about what this group is doing. I'm going
to put my stance even further and say, I don't care what a 6-year-old supports, whether they support Hamas or not, don't kill them.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I just don't think that people are supporting Hamas. You could find somebody, sure, but I don't think that's what's going on here. And I think that even like a lot of moderates are no longer accepting this framing, no matter how much these people say it. I think the tide is turning. I think it may have already turned. I'd like to see some opinion polling on this, like in the United States.
And also, like, don't bomb hospitals. It was pretty recently, just a few days ago, that Israel bombed the last hospital in the Gaza Strip.
Sir, that was a Hamas-spital.
That's their excuse every time, right?
How does that happen?
Well, there's the pagan religion, which I would call why?
Oh, now it's pagan religion. This is great. This guy's going to satanic panic this shit too. Fantastic.
You could say, well, pagan religion. The religious side, and I'm pro. It's not like we have Judaism, Christianity, Islam as like ancient religions. That this is a thin, new ideology that probably I don't think is going to survive. But it is religious in the technical sense that you can't verify the assumptions.
But then anything that you believe is a religion. What do you mean you can't verify the assumptions? I'm having a hard time with this because this guy is this guy's operating under all kind of assumptions, and so is Bari Weiss. And they're just like, either they don't know it or they know that it's expedient for them in the marketplace of ideas to pretend that only the people who disagree with them are the ones who are operating under a set of assumptions. So calling. I don't even know what he's calling pagan now.
Asking if the assumptions are
Everyone who disagrees with me is evil.
And
I
a
think
pagan.
that's what they're saying.
Pagan.
heresy. And so that's the religious side. I think the pagan side of the religion really comes out when they're praying to their high god of anti-Semitism. And then you have a separate issue of...
Friend, you're talking about white supremacists now. You're not talking about pro-Palestinian protesters. You're talking about people who really like Bari Weiss, but just like fucking are a little annoyed that she's Jewish. But they like the... You're talking about the people who are... There's people who are like, they're like, oh, I like what Israel's doing. It just, I don't like the Jews so much. Those people, that's who he's talking about, right? Where they like the idea of Israel trying to create an ethno state. They just wish it wasn't the Jews doing it. So that's the people who are letting their, and I hate to frame it this way, letting their sort of hatred of Jewish people stop them from liking the creation of a ethno state. Oh man, I shouldn't even be saying this stuff. It's like not
I mean, yeah, he's talking about the people who were marching in Charlottesville with those tiki torches saying Jews will not replace us.
Yeah, it's so weird because those people are generally on his and Barry's side in the marketplace of ideas for the most part.
Yep.
Why is this movement pretty fixated on violating its core principle of anti-discrimination by discriminating against Jewish people, the oldest minority in the history?
It's kind of telling if someone is saying, don't bomb children, and you take that as, how could you attack my religion?
Right. I just don't and we're going to put a fork in this here. And I don't think I want to watch the rest of this because this subject, first of all, this subject is depressing. But I want to be pretty clear here that it is, first of all, one thing is it is, and I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't thought about it much until like not long after the events of October 7th. A Jewish friend of mine and I were talking, and he's like, hey, you know what I think is kind of anti-Semitic? Is for people to assume that because I'm Jewish that I must support the actions of some nation state somewhere. He's like, it seems kind of stereotypy to me. And I was like, oh shit. Mm-hmm. You have a point there, friend. And I don't care anymore on this one. If I used to argue with people on Twitter or even Facebook. I don't care. Like I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm not a bigot. I'm just not. So if somebody like wants to tell me that because I don't support the actions of the nation state of Israel that I'm anti-Semitic, I usually just tell them to go away. I'm like, I don't even want to have this fuck off. Right? Like there's again, that person is operating under a set of assumptions, a premise that I don't believe in. And the premise there is that if you don't support this nation state, that you must hate Jewish people, those in your neighborhood, those who aren't in your neighborhood. And I'm like, no. And dumb as fuck.
Yep.
Dumb as fuck. It's
and they're kind of also, under the assumption that if you do support Jewish people, that you should be okay bombing Palestinian children.
Right. And it's,
they think it's mutually exclusive to support Palestinians and support Jews.
Right. They think it's almost like the only way to not be anti-Semitic is to hate Arabs under this rubric.
Yep.
And that's a little bit wrong because there are a lot of Arab Jews, right? So it gets a little bit messy, but it seems like if you're not like for barbarism in this particular scenario, then you just hate everybody who has the same religion or culture as the people doing the barbarism. And it's like, well, what?
Yep.
Dumb as fuck. Absolutely dumb as fuck. Like, to be like during the Cold War, right? If people like didn't like the Soviet Union, and plenty of reasons not to have liked the Soviet Union. That'd be like saying that you don't like the guy down the street that has the Russian bakery. It's like, well, no.
Yeah.
Like it's that stupid. It's that dumb. Like because the person's heritage is that of Russian heritage. or, under the Soviet Union. Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union, and there were other, things that are now different nation states or whatever that were part of the Soviet Union. Now you hate the Ukrainians? No. This is all really dumb. And if you remember, it hasn't been that long since these people were bitching to high heaven about fucking identity politics.
Yep.
And this is identity politics.
Yeah, through and through.
All right. Well, that's the pod. You wanna read the pod out, HK?
Yeah.
This has been terrible.
Yep. Thank you for tuning in. Sorry about that one. And we do this show every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific live here on twitch.tv/Echoplex Media. Check us out sometime. If you'd like to support us, you can do that on patreon.com/Echoplex. And you can also do that at our store, eplex.store. If you're listening live, stick around for after the song where we change the color of the lights and the contents of our drinks. I don't know. I've been drinking wine this whole time, so mine might not change, but stick around and we'll see you for Red Light. And now here is Boomers by Periscope.